She was still wearing her wedding ring when she handed me the folder. 32 pages of financials I didn't know existed, a second account, 3 years of deposits, and a name I recognized. That was the moment I understood. Renata hadn't just been cheating on me. She'd been building a way out. My name is Declan Pruitt. I'm 47 years old, and for the last 11 years I worked as a fire investigator for the county out of Knoxville, Tennessee. I know how fires start. I know the difference between an accident and something deliberate. I know that the most dangerous blazes are the ones that burn slow, under the floorboards, invisible until the whole structure gives. I should have recognized the pattern sooner. I'd been trained to see it. Renata and I met at a mutual friend's cookout in the summer of 2012. She was a sommelier at a restaurant downtown, the kind of woman who could describe a wine's finish and make you feel like she was describing you. Dark hair, easy laugh, a talent for making any room feel like she'd been there longer than anyone else. I was 36. I had a Victorian fixer-upper on Laurel Avenue that I'd bought too cheap because no one else wanted the work. She walked through it on our third date and said, "This house knows what it wants to be. It just needs someone patient enough." I thought she was talking about the house. We married in 2014. She kept working at the restaurant, moved up to head sommelier, then consulting for wine buyers in the region. I kept putting in 60-hour weeks, making sense of other people's disasters. We didn't have children. We had the house, a dog named Sully, and a Saturday morning routine involving farmers market coffee and the crossword. It felt like enough. It felt like a life two people had chosen deliberately. I never thought about the word deliberately until I had reason to. The first flag I filed away without filing was a Tuesday in March about 2 years ago. Renata came home from what she'd said was a client tasting in Chattanooga. I was in the kitchen finishing up a report. She kissed the top of my head and went straight upstairs to shower. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was that I found her jacket on the chair, and when I moved it to the hook, something fell out of the inside pocket. A matchbook. The kind restaurants put out on tables. The name printed on it. Elm and Anchor. A bar on the east side of Knoxville. Not Chattanooga. Not a client venue. Just a neighborhood place 3 miles from our house. I set it on the counter. She came back down, saw it, and said, "Oh, I popped in for a drink on the way back." The drive was long. Her voice was flat, not defensive, not guilty, just flat, like she'd answered a question she'd already prepared for. I said, "Sure." She made tea. We watched television. But I kept thinking about the matchbook, and about how, when a person prepares an answer, it usually means they anticipated the question. The second flag came 6 weeks later. Renata's fitness tracker, one of those wristband models she'd gotten for her birthday, was synced to the app on her phone, and her phone was sometimes left on the kitchen counter unlocked. I'm not someone who went through her phone. But one morning while she was in the shower and I was making eggs, the screen lit up with a notification from the app. It showed her activity log from the previous night. She'd told me she'd been at a late consultation at a client's house in Farragut. The tracker showed 45 minutes of elevated heart rate starting at 9:47 p.m. at a location that was not Farragut. It was a neighborhood called 4th and Gill. I knew that neighborhood. I'd investigated a kitchen fire there 2 years prior. I put the spatula down, turned the eggs off, stood very still for about 30 seconds. Then I turned the burner back on, finished the eggs, and didn't say a word. The third flag was a name. Renata mentioned a colleague 3 or 4 times over the span of a month, a wine importer named Garrett who was apparently brilliant at Burgundy and frustrating to negotiate with. She mentioned him the way you mention someone you're trying to make sound neutral. Too often, too casually, too much careful flatness in her voice. I looked him up. Garrett Wills, 44, owner of an import company based in Asheville. His business Instagram was mostly bottles and vineyard shots. One photo from about 8 months back showed him at an industry dinner. Renata was in the background. They weren't together in the frame, but they were at the same table, and her chair was turned toward him. I closed the browser, went out back and split wood for an hour. But what I found 3 weeks later made the matchbook and the fitness tracker and the Instagram photo look like smoke. What I found was the fire itself. I had come home early on a Wednesday. A scene inspection had wrapped faster than expected, and I was tired in the specific way that follows seeing something you can't unsee at work. The house was empty. Renata's car was gone. I sat down at the kitchen table with a glass of water, and I noticed her laptop was open on the counter, screen still live, the app she used for work notes open and minimized. I didn't mean to see it, but the tab behind it wasn't a work note. It was a browser window, and she'd been logged into a shared cloud drive, a folder I'd never seen in our shared account, sitting alongside our joint vacation photos and tax documents like it belonged there. I clicked it. 12 months of receipts, restaurant reservations, a hotel booking in Asheville from November, the weekend she'd told me she was visiting her college roommate in Charlotte. Photos, not explicit, but intimate. A man's hand on her shoulder at a restaurant table, her face turned up toward him, laughing, and then a document, a single page titled Next Steps, with 2 columns. One column listed her assets, the other listed mine. At the bottom, a note in her handwriting. Talk to Margot about timing, 6 to 8 months. Margot was her oldest friend. Also, as I would later learn, a paralegal. I sat at that table for 40 minutes. The dog put his head in my lap. I didn't move. My hands were flat on the table and completely still, the way I keep them at a scene before I touch anything. I thought about calling someone. My brother, maybe. A lawyer. But I knew from my work that the worst thing you can do with a slow fire is panic and start opening doors. Oxygen feeds it. What you do is contain it first. Document it. Understand the full extent before you act. So I closed the laptop exactly as I'd found it. I went upstairs, changed out of my work clothes, and came back down to start dinner. When Renata came home at 6:30, the kitchen smelled like garlic and olive oil. I handed her a glass of the Côte d'Aron she'd opened on Sunday. Long day? I asked. Always, she said. She kissed my cheek. Then she sat down and told me about a difficult client in Oak Ridge while I finished the pasta. She had no idea. And now, I had 4 weeks to make sure everything was in place before she did. I called a colleague the next morning, a woman I'd known since a joint investigation with the county sheriff's office 5 years prior. She'd since moved into private investigations. I told her what I had and what I needed. Within 2 weeks, she had confirmed Garrett Wills. Dates, locations, 2 hotel receipts paid on his card. A phone bill subpoena I didn't pursue because I didn't need to. I had the cloud drive. I had the next steps document. I had enough. I spent those 4 weeks as the best version of a man I'd ever performed. Saturday crosswords, farmer's market coffee. I drove Renata to a wine event one Friday evening and sat at the bar for 3 hours reading a history of fire investigation while she worked the room. I smiled when she introduced me to colleagues. I shook hands. I drove us home. One night she turned to me in bed and said, "You seem different lately. Calmer." "Work's been lighter," I said. She put her head on my shoulder. "I like you like this." I stared at the ceiling. The house ticked around us the way old houses do, settling, adjusting, doing what it was built to do. I had everything I needed. Now it was only timing. The evening I chose was our anniversary. 11 years. I'd made a reservation at a restaurant we'd gone to on our first real date, a place called Ledger on Market Square. I told Renata I wanted to do something proper this year. She seemed genuinely touched. She wore a green dress I hadn't seen before. She looked beautiful, and I thought about how that used to be a simple thought. And now it was just a fact with no warmth attached to it. We ordered wine. She described the Barolo to me with that easy expertise she'd always had, the one that used to make me feel like I was being let in on something. I listened. I nodded. I poured her water. Then I set a folder on the table between us. "Before we order," I said. She looked at it, then at me. Her fingers went still on her glass. "Declan." "I'm not angry," I said. That was true. I had processed through angry 4 weeks ago, alone in the garage at midnight. "I'm informed. There's a difference." She opened the folder slowly. The first page was a printout of the cloud drive document. The next steps page, her handwriting, her 2 columns. I watched her face. It didn't collapse. It tightened, the way a person looks when they realize the game board is different than they thought. "Where did you get this?" she said. "You left the laptop open." A pause. "Once." That was enough. She set the page down. "This isn't what it looks like." "Renata." I kept my voice level. "I've been a fire investigator for 16 years. I don't guess at cause, I follow evidence." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I didn't want it to end like this." Like what? With you knowing that I know? Or with you having the exit you've been planning without me? I wasn't cruel. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't cold either. I was just precise. The account in your name only, the one with the deposits from the Asheville contracts, the hotel receipts from November, I have those too. Her eyes went somewhere inward. She was calculating. That's when I understood something I hadn't fully let myself understand before. This wasn't a woman who'd fallen for someone and lost herself. This was a woman who had decided methodically, and then covered her tracks while I made Saturday coffee and finished crosswords and thought we were choosing this life deliberately. Garrett, I said. Just the name. She didn't flinch. Yes. How long? 14 months. The waiter approached. I held up one finger. He retreated. I want a divorce, I said. I've already spoken to an attorney. The asset division reflects the prenuptial agreement we signed, which I have a copy of. You'll retain your consulting business and the vehicle. The house stays with me. I've had it appraised. What you've already moved into the separate account is accounted for in the settlement. I slid the second page across. I'm not looking for a fight. I'm not going to call Garrett's firm or post anything online. I'm telling you this is done. And it can be done cleanly, or it can be done loudly. That's the only choice left. She read the page. Her jaw was set. You've been planning this, she said. So were you, I said. I just started later. She looked up at me. Something in her expression shifted. Not guilt, not exactly, but something adjacent. Recognition, maybe. That she had underestimated the man across the table, the one who'd spent 11 years calmly learning how things burned. I'm sorry, she said. It was quiet and it was real, and I believed her, and it didn't change anything. I know, I said. I folded my napkin and set it on the table. I'll stay at my brother's tonight. The attorney will be in touch Monday. I stood up. I left cash for the wine and the bread we'd already eaten. I put on my coat. She didn't try to stop me. She sat at that table in her green dress with the folder in front of her and watched me walk out, and I didn't look back, because I had already said everything. In the weeks that followed, the picture clarified in ways I hadn't fully expected. The Asheville account held nearly $40,000. Consulting fees she'd routed outside our shared finances over 3 years. My attorney confirmed the prenup held. She didn't contest it. The divorce was finalized in 4 months, the fastest I could have reasonably hoped for. Renata moved to Asheville before the ink was dry. Whether she and Garrett Wills are still together, I genuinely don't know. I stopped caring around month 2. There was one detail I learned later that I hadn't anticipated. My investigator told me, as a footnote, that Garrett Wills was not a free agent when this began. He'd been married. His wife filed for divorce 6 weeks after mine did. Whether they'd communicated, whether it was coincidence, I don't know. But somewhere in Asheville, another man had sat down to a folder he hadn't expected. I thought about that sometimes. I hoped he'd had someone level-headed in his corner. Sully the dog stayed with me. The house on Laurel Avenue, which we'd spent 7 years slowly restoring, stayed with me. The Saturday crossword still happens. The farmer's market coffee still happens. Some Saturdays I sit on the back porch, which I finished refinishing last spring, and I think about the thing Renata said when she first walked through this house. That it knew what it wanted to be. That it just needed someone patient enough. She wasn't wrong about the house. 11 years is a long time to invest in something, and I won't pretend the ending didn't leave marks. It did. Some nights I sat in the house and felt the particular silence of a space that used to hold 2 people's noise. That's real, and I'm not going to dress it otherwise. But here's what's also real. I knew my own mind when I walked out of that restaurant. I knew what I'd done and hadn't done. I'd been patient without being passive. I'd been precise without being cruel. I'd given her every opportunity to be honest. And when she chose strategy over honesty, I responded in kind. A man told me once, early in my career, that the most important skill in my field wasn't analysis or chemistry or even instinct. It was knowing when to stop and let the scene tell you what happened instead of deciding what happened, and then looking for confirmation. I've tried to live by that. I'm not always good at it, but I tried. What would you have done? Walked away the moment you found that folder, or waited until you had the full picture? Coming up next, a man who spent 18 months believing his wife's late nights were just overtime, until a coworker handed him a receipt that turned his entire world upside down. That story is next on The Quiet Revenge.